Good morning. I have something a little bit special to share with you this morning. And the title that I've chosen is 2012, which all of them start with that. My Non-Judgmental Mom. Dr. Mary was one powerful little lady. It was my privilege to have known her for the last 10 years of her amazing life. She had been a pilot, mayor of Imperial Beach, California, a religious science practitioner, and Doctor of Divinity minister. She went skydiving when she was 75 years old. And best of all, she was my friend. She believed in me, even when I had trouble believing in myself. I was like a son, the son she never had. And to me, she was my spiritual, non-judgmental mom. What you see behind me is a picture that I had on my wall in the garage apartment that I lived in from 1998 in February until July 2005. She died in February 2005. At the bottom of that picture behind me, there's an inscription. And I used to look at that frequently. I mean, the picture hung right inside my doorway in the little hallway that led into the main part of the huge one-room apartment. On the other side of the wall was the bathroom. But it hung on that wall, and I would stop often upon entering the house and look at that picture and look at this inscription, which was a quotation from Waldo Emerson. But presently there will arise a race of preachers who will take such hold of the omnipotence of truth that they will blow the old falsehoods to shreds with the breath of their mouth. And I would say a silent prayer, may I be one of those preachers, because I was a preacher from the time I was 14. And probably even before that, but that's when I preached my first official sermon in the largest Assembly of God church in the state of New Jersey. I've talked about that before, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about Dr. Mary. I said she was a little lady. She was 4'11" 3/4, and don't forget the 3/4. Where did I put them? These are her shoes. I have 2 pairs of her shoes in the library and meditation room that I dedicated on August 1st, 2005. That was the first room that I completed in moving into my house. And it was dedicated, as I said, in August of 2005. I still sit frequently in the chair the very chair that she used to sit in, which has an Afghan thrown over the chair that was crocheted by my mother. So I'm sitting in Dr. Mary's chair, and my natural birth mother, I'm enfolded in her blanket, if you will, Afghan. She used to say, I make every stitch with love. I fill every stitch with love. When I first was invited by Dr. Mary to move into that one-room apartment, I was concerned because next to her was another octogenarian. And Behind her was another octogenarian. So there were 3 octogenarian women living there, and I thought, oh my God, how's that gonna be? I'm not gonna be able to handle that. I didn't know Dr. Mary very well yet at that point, though we had had conversations, and I had been invited on 2 or 3 occasions to speak in her church uh, before she retired in 1997. She was the first female minister in Brevard County, Florida. And when she told her story of the early days, less than a month and a half before she passed from this earth in physical form, she shared how the ministerium was really upset having a woman as part of the ministerial body here in Brevard County, because up until that point there had only ever been men that were ministers. And then the Unity Church got its own minister. I forget, Dark, I think. I don't remember her first name, but I think her last name was Dark. But Dr. Mary told how it took them a while to accept women as clerics or as ministers. But in 1987, Dr. Mary was awarded by the Florida Today newspaper as the best cleric in the county. She came here, as I think I said, and maybe I didn't say, in 1969, and she retired in 1997. So she had served a good while in the capacity as minister of the Chapel of Light, the Science of Mind Center of Melbourne. When I moved in, I was pleasantly surprised that I used to spend time with each of these 3 octogenarian women, helping them with things and talking with them, but no one more than Dr. Mary. We would sit out on the stoop in front of her house and sometimes talk for hours, often in the evening, when the lights from Melbourne would glisten on the water of the Indian River. That was her front yard. And we'd see the lights just shine across the river and send their reflection over toward where we were sitting, right underneath an oak tree that had a diameter that's probably 5 or 6 feet in diameter. I mean, it's a huge, huge oak tree. I mean, there's no way I could put my arms even halfway around it. Not even halfway. The circumference must have been, I don't know, 20 feet, 18, 20 feet at least. Huge, huge oak tree. But she and I would sit out there and we would chat. And I would take her to meetings after she could no longer drive. Her car sat for quite a few years in her garage, and I finally gave it to one of my neighbors who helped me move, who lives right up the street from me, the first man that I met when I moved into this neighborhood. But we would sit, Dr. Mary and I, and we would chat. And when I was down, she'd always lift me up. In fact, I got to be honest with you, the whole time that I knew her, I never heard her complain or badmouth anyone. There were only 2 people in her world that she ever was negative about, and they were both women that she referred to as busybodies. They wanted to make decisions for her, and one of those is the lady that's involved in the lawsuit that I've been involved in since July 2005, Phyllis Wilhelm. Always wanted to tell her what she should and shouldn't do, and was trying to get her to raise my rent. And, she said, stop paying me by check, start giving me cash instead, because it's none of her business what you give me. I don't have to take anything if I don't want to. And I raised my own rent 3 times while I lived there. because initially she only wanted $100 a month for me to stay in the apartment, and I, in steps, raised it up to $200 a month. But in any case, she was my friend. And on Valentine's Day of 2005, I took her out to lunch, and she had trouble breathing. There was something wrong, and she'd say, "Will you do treatment for me?" Treatment is another word in Science of Mind for prayer. And Science of Mind is not Christian Science, by the way. It's different. It's Ernest Holmes was the founder of the Church of Religious Science. But in any case, I did treatment for her and did treatment for her. And I kept saying, "Dr. Mary, you need to see a doctor," because her feet were swelling, her hands were swelling, and she was short of breath. And finally, after doing this for 3 days, on the 16th, I convinced her. And she says, "I don't want to go to a hospital. If I die, I'd rather die at home." And I took her to the doctors. I finally convinced her to let me take her to the doctors. And I tried to drop her off right outside the door, but she wouldn't have any of that. She insisted in me parking the car and walking, and I had to keep stopping because she'd be short of breath. Here's another picture of her. And another one. Here's her Doctor of Divinity. No, this one first. This was the only picture that I had of she and I together. In 1997, oh no, I'm sorry, not 1997, 2000, and I forget how to read dates. In February the 11th, 97, that's how you read that date. Is that correct, though? Oh, I think it was 2002, because as I recall, Donna and I, who was my fiance at the time, and she wouldn't have been in 97, so I didn't know Donna till 2001. But anyway, I took her to Shamu Stadium, and she went in high heels. When I say Shamu Stadium, SeaWorld is what I mean, in Orlando. And she wore high heels. And I said to her when we left, "Dr. Mary, you can't walk around in an amusement park with high heels." But she dressed up and insisted. This was Dr. Mary in July 2004, the last known picture taken of her, which I put on the memorial that I created for her. March 5th would have been her birthday. In 2005, she died February 25th. That's all my show and tell. But she had congestive heart failure, and the doctors diagnosed it immediately when she went in and called an ambulance, and she went into the hospital and, as I said, died on the 25th. During that time, she was getting visited from people from the other side. I'd be sitting and talking with her, and she'd start talking to somebody else, and she'd say, "Don't you see them? They're right here." People that had passed and gone before her were coming to welcome her to the other side. And she told me early on in our relationship, our friendship, That she had been told she would die when she was 86. She would have been 87 in 2005, but she didn't quite make it to her birthday. She died when she was 86. She often made statements like, "Ron, I'd like you to have the house when I go, because you've been like a son to me." And I never thought anything of it. It was just an old lady telling me what she wanted. She never said, "Ron, would you take me to a lawyer and make a will? Ron, will you help me create a trust? Ron, will you do this and do that?" When I got engaged to Donna, who was another lovely lady, I started staying with Donna in Melbourne, right across the river from where Dr. Mary lived. And I would go home. My computer stayed in that one-room apartment, in the garage apartment at Dr. Mary's, and I'd go there virtually every day except when Donna and I would travel for weekends, which we did frequently. And I would sit and I would spend time talking with Dr. Mary out on the stoop, sometimes in her house. But I came home one day. When I say home, I went back to Dr. Mary's to go to my computer, and I pulled in at the same time at these other people, the people that started the lawsuit, Eugene and Phyllis Wilhelm. And I pulled in either right ahead of them or right behind them. I can't remember which. But Dr. Mary says, I just went and created a will. And Phyllis Wilhelm said to me, "Don't worry, Ron, we left you a little something." I didn't discuss it at all. I don't remember exactly what month that was. It was 2002, I believe. But in June of 2004, Dr. Mary stopped me. I was living there because Donna had broken up with me, broke the engagement, and I was back living in the garage apartment. And I came home from work one day, and Dr. Mary says, "Do you have a minute, Ron?" And I said, "Sure, Dr. Mary." And I sat down, and she said, "I've made a terrible mistake." She says, "I gave the Wilhelms some money, and they're not paying me back. And I don't trust them anymore." And they had been working in a relationship with her, and I says, they would take her out for supper every now and again, and I used to say to her, "That's nice that they buy you supper." She says, "What do you mean? I always pay." I says, "What do you mean you always pay?" She says, "Well, they don't pay. I always pay." And anyway, she was concerned about the will that she had created, and she couldn't find her copy of it. Her house, she was like me, she's somewhat like me, she was a pack rat and saved a lot of stuff. But she did finally find the will, and yeah, they had left me $500 in the will on a property that was valued at about $1 million. And they had left the Shriners Children's Hospital $5,000, if I remember right, and the rest of it they left for themselves. And they had talked her into quit claiming her property over to them, and she was a tenant on her own property. None of that information was I aware of until she found the will, and we began to investigate. Not when I say we, Walter and other of the friends in the metaphysical community, Pat Stang and Claudia, and different ones were giving her advice as far as you need to get out of that will. They're taking advantage of you, which she already had said to the only nephew, the only living relative that had kept in touch with her, Marion Johannesson. He told me himself that she would say, "I've made a terrible mistake. I can't believe I was so stupid." She felt like she had been conned by the Wilhelms, who created the lawsuit against me. the same month that I closed on this house that I'm living in. But I insisted when we created the trust that, Dr. Mary, you always said you wanted to leave a significant portion of your property to the Shriners because you had promised your late husband Leroy that that's what you would do. And he was a Shriner, a 32nd degree Mason. And one of her other friends, John Calvert, was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. And he testified in the beginning of the lawsuit that she had told him many times that she wanted me to have her house, and that I was one of her only friends that she could really trust. Because I never told her what to do. I says, Dr. Mary, whatever you want, that's what's important. What do you want? But I did insist that she not leave everything to me, which is what she wanted. And initially, when we started working, helping her create her trust, she wanted me to get 70% of her estate and the Shriners to get 30%. And there were a couple of other people, including her nephew, that were to get stipends of $20,000, $20,000, and $10,000, and then it was to be divided 50-50 between the Shriners and myself. Because we found the second will that was created the year after her late husband had passed, and it showed 50% to the Shriners. So we changed it from 30-70 to 50-50. And there were a few small stipends in the original will from 1995. I never met Leroy. He died the year before I got to know Dr. Mary. But anyway, our relationship was a beautiful one. And for those of you, there was at least a couple of people that said, you owe the money to the trust. No, the trust was all mine. I was this, and it's not proper form, and I know that, but she insisted in having the paralegals that she had dealt with help her draw up the trust, and they just gave her forms, and who do you want to be the executor or the personal representative of your estate? Me. Who do you want to be the trustee? Me. And we had two trustees, actually, two successor trustees in case I were to die before she did. And the other trustee was one of the people that she used to complain about, who also got $20,000. And I would try to get her to leave something for the Wilhelms. And she says, why should I leave them anything? Was always her response. Why should I leave them anything? And I even created a video will before she died. I was talking to her about what she wanted. And then my lawyer stole that videotape and would not give it back to me, even though it pre-existed the lawsuit and everything else. He would not return it to me because he sent me a bill that he knew that I did not have the ability to pay. Another crooked lawyer, or as there are sometimes referred to, liars. In any case, Dr. Mary wanted me to have the whole thing, and I did use undue influence as I was charged with, but it was not on my behalf because she wanted to leave me everything. Everything. And number one, I wanted her to honor what she had promised her late husband. And number two, that would have looked terrible for me to have everything. It would have looked absolutely terrible. And I've always wanted to be fair. So I did insist that she honor her late husband and that she honor her longtime pianist, her one nephew that did keep in touch with her, even if it was only once a year. Call her and a couple of times visited her. And the one other lady whom I won't name. But there were three of us. And anyway, we finally got her out of the old will and helped her create the trust. And she died. That was in December of 2004. And she died, as I said, in February the 25th, 2005, before her birthday, which was March 5th, which we had the memorial service for her on her birthday. Anyway, that's the story of at least some of the story of my non-judgmental mom. And I didn't do it on Mother's Day because I had already determined that I was going to talk about something very specific on Mother's Day, which will be coming up tomorrow. And I realize I've gone way longer than usual on this one. And I thank those of you that have taken time to listen to the very end, to my story, my telling of one of the most significant relationships I've had with a lady in my life. Not a romantic one, but a friendship one. One of like a mother and a son. And it's so appropriate to do the day before Mother's Day, as each of you think about your mom. And if you've been wounded, to heal those wounds. She believed in humanity. She believed in me. And I believe in you. And I send you love on this day before Mother's Day. Namaste.